The topic is the Somalia pirate crisis, and of course we have with us to continue our conversation dealing with this crisis in a real sense in Somalia, Professor Robert Pickard from Tennessee State University, as well as Middle Tennessee State University. And of course, Professor Pickard, let us pick up where we left off. I think we went into that first segment. We stayed too long in that segment, and so let's sort of pick up at where we left off to have you to talk about Somalia and some of the crises that you see there.
Okay, now first of all, I wrote an article which was published this past Tuesday, the 12th, on Somalia, and really about what was called the axis of upheaval. The historian Neil Ferguson, who I'm sure you're familiar with, wrote a recent article in Foreign Policy magazine entitled Axis of Upheaval, in which he says that 3 factors can predict lethal organized violence. First of all, ethnic disintegration, economic volatility, and thirdly, empires in decline. When structures of imperial rule has crumbled, battles for power surely are most bloody. He mentioned several countries there. He talked about Russia might be joining that list. The Congo, of course, is very much, the Congo for 12 years has been torn apart in rebellion. You've had Rwanda, of course, at one time. I think Rwanda's in good shape now. You've got Mexico, our nearest neighbor, thanks to the laxity of our gun laws in this country, which is an outrage. They are becoming that way with the narco problem, the narco-terrorism, as we're talking about, or the gangs. Somalia has, since 1990, basically been an anarchy. Of course, we had soldiers there for a short time, and we had to leave. And the problem with the pirates is nothing new. They've been poaching their neighbor Kenya's wildlife for a long time. As you know, rhino horn is sold as an aphrodisiac in Asian countries. And they have also become a training ground for groups like Al-Qaeda and others that other terrorist groups, as well as criminal organizations. And the pirate thing is very easy for them. It's just like off our coast in the early 17th century, or late 17th, early 18th century, as I'm sure you've taught in class. It was very easy for pirates to stop ships because they wouldn't put up any fight. Nobody's going to fight for somebody else's property, and that's the same thing happening here. And they've got a million-mile coast there along through the Gulf of Aden. This is one of the most strategic and important shipping areas in the world. Now, the reason I say that this has been coming on for a long time is I could see it when I was there in the early 80s. Somalia has 5 points. If you refer to the Somalia flag, there are 5 points on the star in the flag. The star is right in the middle of the flag. The 5 points stand for 2 parts of the country of Somalia proper. One is northern part, which was once a British colony. The southern part, which is Italian. It also includes the Djibouti, which is north of Somalia, an independent country, which is Somali, but French Somaliland. You have a large part of Ethiopia there called the Ogaden, which are ethnic Somali, and part of Kenya, which is Somali. And so all of these places Somalia claims. Now, the Organization of African Unity, of course, has been against any kind of changing borders because, quite frankly, as I'm sure you know, the Europeans drew the borders of the African countries to suit their own purposes, very arbitrarily and capriciously. And so that's why there's so much ethnic and tribal conflict there, and also why, you know, for a lot of other things, there's warfare between tribes, there's tremendous corruption. Anytime any group gets in, they're going to, you know, particularly in countries that have oil like Angola, they're going to try to take this. Now, what happened with Somalia in 1976, of course, Haile Selassie, who ruled the country very benevolently for many years, was overthrown by a new group led by a man named Mengistu. And Haile Selassie had always left the Ogaden alone. They didn't have any interest in being part of Somalia, neither really did Djibouti or parts of Kenya. But they began oppressing and trying to remove the Somali people from their land. It's possibly because of the mineral wealth there. Nobody is really sure, but thousands of refugees began leaving, obviously the Ethiopians, if they caught these people trying to leave, they would chop off their hands.
Okay.
So I saw a lot of people without hands.
In your own experiences?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Now, when they got into Somalia, they were the same ethnic group, the same tribe, as a matter of fact, as the people, the host country. That's very unusual. Very unusual in most of these countries, and it was a major crisis coming on kind of the tail end of the Cambodia crisis, or about the same time actually as the Cambodia crisis. And UNHCR wanted to justify its budget. UNHCR came in to manage this, but they didn't register the refugees, so there's no possibility of telling who was a refugee and who was not, because of the ethnic, well, the same group of people. So right at first, the food was being distributed. It was being sent out from the capital, Mogadishu, and trucks, and the trucks would head straight up to Djibouti, sell the truck, sell the merchandise. People were starving.
Food that was supposed to be for the refugees.
Right, exactly. Now, finally, the UNHCR brought in CARE, ELU CARE, Emergency Logistics Unit, to distribute the food. And they actually, in the early days when they had the first UN volunteers there, they were actually riding shotgun on trucks to make sure they got where they went. By the time I'd gotten there, it had calmed down a little bit, but what had happened is the country had become dependent on refugee aid. They claimed that there were over 1 million refugees, like 1,300,000 refugees. It was far more than there were, probably about 400,000. UNHCR just arbitrarily decided on a figure of 700,000. But constantly they were claiming, the place where Jalalaxy was the name of the town where I ran my, where I ran the operation, there might have been about 14,000 refugees. They claimed there were 85,000 refugees. This is about 4 times the population of Murfreesboro at that time. And it's just ridiculous, and everybody knew it. And we would tell privately, in private conversations, we'd tell these people with the Somali government, look, you're not fooling anybody. Everybody knows what's going on. You think we're stupid? And they would pay no attention. They had a very, fatalistic, there's something about Islam that's very fatalistic in a way. And so we told them, you're asking for trouble. And that's what happened. The government basically kind of unraveled toward the ends of the 80s. Those refugees began leaving the country and going into Ethiopia and Kenya and these places. The government disintegrated around 1990 when the president, Mohammed Siad Barre, was killed. And since then, it has been an economic and political basket case. Of course, we had troops there for a short term in the 1990s, and you've seen Black Hawk Down, you saw what happened there. One thing I noticed when I saw a Frontline film about this is that soldiers in helicopters had their feet hanging out of the helicopter, and feet are dirty in in Somali culture. That's an insult to them. And I wish I'd been there to tell them that. They're taking off their shoes and waving it back because they see it as an insult. But basically, we've got a serious problem there now, and we're going to have them in other countries as well if we don't act.
And so in a real sense, you think that there's just simply a collapse of any kind of governmental authority in Somalia, and that is the basis for...
They have a president of parliament right now, but really with no power, and they can't do anything. It's basically divided by medieval warlords. It's like something you see in a post-apocalyptic movie.
Okay, and of course, Mr. Pickard, let us take this second commercial break, after which we'll come back and give you an opportunity to elaborate upon some of these things. And of course, we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. The guest is